Hello and welcome to episode number 201 of the ETPHD Team podcast. My word, words are struggling to come out today. And with myself and Roz. Hi Roz, how are you?
I'm very good, so I am enjoying this. Thank you.
Great. And you're looking glowing today.
Thank you.
I'm quite jealous. And Anna, how are you?
I was thinking about this earlier, right? I am fine, like genuinely fine. But twice this week, I've had dreams that my teeth are falling out. And I'm like, are you okay, hon? I'm not.
No, that does mean something. And have you Googled it?
Yeah. I mean, stressed, anxious, could be something else. I'm like, yeah. I blame the full moon.
Definitely just the filming. Just the filming.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Definitely not life.
It's not. See, the thing is, it's not my full teeth that are falling out.
Sorry to gush.
It's like,
No.
because I've got that composite bonding. So it's not like a full veneer, it's just a square off. And it's like that bit that's falling out. And what's underneath is just like weird little pointy teeth. I'm like, oh my God.
Oh my God, that's horrendous.
It's been wild, I'm not gonna lie. But
Oh.
how are you?
Well, I'm swell, thanks. I'm pleased that you're having the dreams and not me anymore.
I know, I did think that. I'll take one for the team.
Thanks so much. So selfless. Stopped having bad dreams recently, which is nice. I think it's because I stopped listening to so much crime fiction. I was listening to so much crime fiction on Audible before bed and just all day. Well, not all day, but like, when I needed a little break. I find Audible really good for stopping scrolling. When I found myself using TikTok and stuff at like stupid times, I don't know why I don't even want to watch this. So then, yeah, I was using Audible as an replacement. But then, obviously, Audible with crime fiction is not ideal at 10 p.m. That's when you have dreams that you're about to be murdered. So that stopped. So that's fab. Okay. I think we should just crack on with the questions. Anna, do you want to go first?
Any tips for finishing, well, I'm guessing stop or not finishing food from partner's plate if he hasn't eaten it all? But I guess this could go for partner, kids.
So I would just check in with like making sure that you're fully satiated. I remember once actually, I don't know if any of you saw this. It was like diet advice and it was quite mainstream at the time. And it was something like when people have leftovers, like pour bleach on it or something so you can't eat it. What was it? It was wild, like it was ludicrous. But I remember it being like, again, like mainstream. Don't do that is one thing. That was not my advice. Definitely don't do that. Just check that one, like you're fully satiated. I obviously don't know your goals. If you're in a fat loss phase, you might not be able to be fully satiated after every meal. And I think that's important to recognize. And if that is the case and you do have a fat loss goal, then maybe you could say like, well, can your partner, like when your partner's finished, like, can they clear the table rather than you? Because often it's like, sometimes it's like just sitting with food in front of you is going to increase the likelihood of you eating it because it's in your visible vicinity. And I think sometimes we don't pay enough attention to our food environment because we're like, have unconditional permission to eat. You can have it all around you all the time. And of course that's true. But we know from the research that having apples on your table means that you're probably going to be more likely to eat fruit than if you have sweets on your table, you're probably going to be more likely to eat sweets, and that's just common sense. So I would say like look at your food environment a little bit, make sure you're satiated, especially if you're not dieting, or replace finishing their plates with something else. So one of my clients who used to find that she did this with her kids, she would always make herself a hot drink one that she was then cleaning up after the kids, like cleaning up their dinner, so that she had something different to occupy her hands, to soothe her, to give her like that sense of warmth that wasn't the food from her kids' plates. And she found that quite helpful.
Yeah. Sorry, Roz, you go.
I was an au pair whenever I was traveling like a couple of years ago, and the kids never finished their plates. They didn't. And I remember at times I was like, oh, a little nibble here, and I kind of caught myself out. But I think like as Emilia said, like introducing a pause, checking in with how I feel, but getting into the habit of maybe either just doing the dishes straight away, and that, because that's also a very good habit to have anyway. So just kind of like removing it from you, but still like a productive habit. So it is. And maybe even if it is kids or partner, get them to clean up after themselves as well.
Imagine a world. And we're not being sexist here. We're not, partner could be anyone.
Do you know what I was thinking though? Like, not necessarily in terms of similar in line, Emilia, to what you were saying in terms of like satisfaction from the meal, but I've definitely fallen into it in the past in like serving myself. I know I'd eat more if I was on my own, and I'd serve myself something smaller if I was eating with someone else. So maybe just check in that that's also not going on.
That's so true. You know, I definitely do that now, and it's not I always question myself of like, is it from a fear of judgment? And it's not from that. It's just that I think, honestly, for me, now here's my hypothesis. For me, I like a meal to hit a certain level of overall enjoyment. And that enjoyment could come from the taste. It could come from potentially the amount and the feeling of fullness, because I love feeling comfortably full. Or it could come from the environment. It could come from like the person that I'm with, the connection. And if you're, and I question, like, maybe I have a little bit less when I'm with someone else because I'm getting so fulfilled from the connection that I'm having with someone. Or maybe I spend a bit more time cooking something for someone else, and so it's a bit more delicious. So then that's why I eat a bit less, because it's more, I get more joy from that. And I wonder if it's like a pie chart of like where you get your joy from. And actually, if you set the dinner table for yourself when you're on your own and you make it a really joyous experience of candles and whatever else you want to do, I wonder if that impacts how much you eat, because actually you get that overall joy pie chart kind of maxed out on other things. There's my hypothesis. No evidence for it whatsoever.
I'll give it a whirl. I'll let you know.
Ros, question.
Any ideas for quick, easy meals when one finds oneself at home without leftovers?
I'm loving the use of one and oneself. Anyone that uses oneself in a sentence, like, congratulations to you, because you're well done. That's just, I never use one. Sometimes I find myself going to use it. I'm like, whoa. Who are you? Do you want to go first, Adam?
I'm gonna steal yours with the bag of lentils. I'm big on that at the moment. Also, I am very lazy, and when I can't be bothered, it's beans or scrambled eggs on toast. Bagel, yeah. And that's, I mean, that to me is like ultimate comfort and satisfying as well. It hits all spots.
I'm really into bread right now, like just all types of bread.
Oh, the olive bread that you put up the other day, I was like, I can taste it.
That was insane. That was from Sainsbury's, and it was like a white olive bread with walnuts in it, and like the like flour on the top, and oh my god, it's making my mouth water even think, just with like a bit of butter on top. Oh, heavenly. But yeah, I'm very much into bread right now, so my answer is going to be very much related to probably bread. I always like to have like a loaf of bread either in the freezer or fresh, or bagels or crumpets and things like that in the freezer. I'd say having eggs or something, fast food and good for you. Remember that from the advert, that Red Lion advert? Anyone? And then he goes into the fridge and all he's got is eggs, and it's like, oh my gosh, he's made some French omelette. Is that what it's called? Anyway, eggs are really useful for that. Like a couple of eggs on crumpets, fine, done. Frozen veggies, frozen fruit, done. And I think sometimes, like, take the pressure off having it all to be in one meal. Sometimes I'll make a meal and I'm like, none of this goes, but it's all delicious, and that's fine. But also sometimes I'll be like, okay, well, I'm just gonna have like peanut butter and jam on toast, and then I'm gonna have a yogurt with fruit after it to get my protein in, then to get some fruit in there, and that's fine. Like, I think we think it has to be like, well, I'm gonna have protein and carbohydrates and fat and fruit and vegetables, or probably vegetables and dinner all in one sitting, and it's like, actually, just have like little bits. Nothing better than a picky tea. I love a picky tea.
Do you know what? It made me think, like, also quick and easy. This was a while ago. A client sent me, I didn't even know, I thought they had to go in the oven, potato waffles in the toaster.
Oh yeah, the toaster.
Like, mind blown. I was like, well, I'm always going to have those now. So there's something else for you.
Yes.
I love Linda McCartney sauce, like the veggie sausages, and yeah, you can now buy them in packs of 10, I think, or packs of 12. Like they come in a bag. Yeah.
Oh.
And then I just do, yeah, like the bags of like, Jimmy Oliver, lentils, quinoa, half a pouch. But I've had wisdom teeth problems this week. And kind of what you said, Amelia, I've been eating like a yogurt and then a pot of beans together, if you know what I mean. Or
Mm.
I can't really like enjoy anything crunchy at the minute, and I'm just kind of really eating for like practicalities, and that's okay. And like I'm still kind of satisfied. I still get like the protein in, still got a portion of veg, but it's just maybe not, doesn't look that good. But that's okay.
Doesn't meet the what I eat in a day post standard was, to be honest.
No, never. I know I was like, should I do a really ironic what a dietitian eats in a day?
Please do.
Please do it. I would like to see that one. But I mean, I thought the other day, I don't know how I ever lived without those microwave pouches of chickpeas from Lidl. And I actually went to Sainsbury's the other day as a wee treat because I was like, I'm eating the same thing a lot, so I'm gonna go to Sainsbury's and just got my bread, obviously. And they had the actual branded microwave pouches, which are twice the price, 3 times the price of Lidl. So we won't be going there all the time. However, it was a wee treat, and they had different types of microwave grains, and I still came out with the same thing. A big like bag of sal, some like bits of vegetables, and some microwave lentils, pulses, quinoa, whatever, because I love them so much. And my dinner takes me 3.5 minutes to prepare. 3.5, and that's it. And that 2 minutes of that is just in the microwave, mixing those with the Baby Bell lights, putting them on top of salad, which takes 2 seconds to chop up, and it's like done. And yeah, so I think we just often overcomplicate it a little bit. Okay, tips on how to improve body image when you have specific areas of your body that you really dislike.
Stop trying to love them, first of all. I think that would be my first port of call, because I think it almost like ends up making you feel like you're doing something wrong, that because you're purposely trying to force yourself to like something that, or love something that you just might never get to that point. And that's okay, because I think we'd all agree there are parts about our bodies that I'm never going to say I absolutely love it, but I mean, it's okay. I'm okay with it now.
And yeah, I'd agree as well. And also thinking about, what do you love about your body, and whatever that body part is, respect that part. Can you give loving kindness to that part of your body? And I think acceptance is a big word here. It's maybe we don't expect you to love it, but can you maybe bring some body functionality into it as well? Like, does that part of your body offer something? Like your legs, can you go for a walk? Or if it's your arms, can you, I can't think of things to do with your arms. Actually, a client said to me last night, she stacked the dishwasher and she practiced body functionality doing the dishwasher, and she said she'd never felt, she was like, Rose, I was just thinking, like, not everyone can stack a dishwasher. And she's like, I went to bed feeling so grateful for my body. And I was like, that's really an amazing example. So it is. And maybe you could, practice some things like that with those body parts.
Yeah, I found for me, one of my best friends got diagnosed with chronic illness when we were about 31 or something like that. And for me, that really changed my appreciation for my body, the way that I spoke about it, the way that I spoke to other people about it. Because I remember even like the way that I write my emails, if anyone reads my emails, they'll know I'll always do my best to be inclusive of all body types and things. And part of that is awareness, but part of that is watching someone so close to me struggle, like to go to the gym or whatever it may be. And it just really gave me a perspective of like, what if I didn't have these things? And I think sometimes, imagine you didn't have, like, say it's your legs, right? Imagine you couldn't walk. Imagine like you couldn't do probably a lot of the things that you do right now. And of course, there are a lot of people who can't walk, who live incredible wholehearted lives, but to have that removed from you, what would that feel like? And sometimes that is actually a really helpful way of practicing gratitude, imagining what it would be like without it. obviously the things like managing your body, checking around that area is really important. I also think questioning, I think it's important to question why it is that you don't like these areas of yourself. And I think this is because on my mind this morning, I was writing about my email for my subscriber list, and I'm going to actually share the quote that I really love that was in this email. Give me 1 second until I actually find it. Have any of you read The Beauty Myth by Naomi Wolf?
No.
So this is a book, it's a very feminist, it's like kind of cult feminist literature, actually. It's fantastic. And one of the quotes she says, and one of the parts of the book she says, a culture fixated on female thinness is not an obsession about female beauty, but an obsession about female obedience. And I love it, because what it really encompasses is that we still all inherently believe that leaner is more attractive, right? Like somewhere, like we obviously talk about this a lot, and we challenge this narrative. And you know, I've spoken a lot before about times where I've tried to gain weight and people are just flabbergasted at the idea that someone would think that they look better bigger. And I say this with all of the acknowledgement of my privilege of being the body that I'm in, as it stands, like completely. But things with like parts of our body that we don't like. So mine when I was younger would always be my arms. I'd be like, I hate my arms. I'd stand in a certain way in pictures, and me and my friends would all stand with like skinny arm pose. I don't know if any of you remember that. You'd point your elbow out and you'd like oh God. But now I think logically, and I think, why did it? My arms are like, generally when I gain body fat, arms is one of the places that I do store my body fat. And I'm like, oh, I'm so grateful, because actually it's a healthy place to store body fat. It's not around my organs. Like, that's really good, and I can be aware of that. But even now it's like, why do I think having more fat on my arms than another part of my body is a bad thing? There's no logic to it whatsoever, other than this kind of conditioning that we think for some reason that leaner is always more attractive. And it's like, people will be listening to this like, well, of course leaner is more attractive, but it's like, but why? Diet culture came from patriarchy. The diet culture is this obsession with controlling us, making us control our bodies to the degree that we can't then put energy into anything else, because we're so focused on controlling our bodies. But if you ask men, 50% of them will say, I prefer women in bigger bodies. 50% of them probably will say, I prefer women in smaller bodies. Now I'm out of percentages.
Yeah.
Point is, right, if I'm being really heteronormative here, right, because it's my own experience I'm talking about in this specific situation. And in my email I was talking about, every man I've dated has always said to me, I prefer you when you're a bit fatter, in a nice way, right? Like if we've been having the conversation, not unsolicited, etc. And it's like, I wish someone had said that to me when I was 15. Like, I believe that I'm getting leaner to be more accepted by other people and to be loved more by men, right? A lot of us have been through that process. And it's like, actually, that's just a diet culture message, like given to us by men to control our bodies so that we're not taking over the world, when realistically, the men that we're trying to impress don't even want us to be leaner in the first place. It's like, it's ludicrous. And I know I've kind of gone off on a tangent, but it's like, realistically, if there's a body part that you hate, try and be a bit objective about it and keep perspective of like, realistically, what does that actually mean? And is it a judgment that you've put on yourself based on society that doesn't actually even exist in the first place? And then you have an existential crisis, and then it's fine.
Just fine. Totally fine.
Totally fine.
I was going to add, it's just a quote that came to mind of Lucy Lord's quote. She always says the quote, like, if we all put our problems into the middle and had to pick out a problem, you still would pick out your own problem. And I was just thinking, when I was younger, I used to like hate my legs. I played hockey loads, and I remember like my calves. I was like, why do they stick out like that? But actually, when I was at uni, my flatmate was like, I love your legs. And it's just so funny that maybe one part that you don't like, you don't see yourself the way other people see you. And maybe, you know, chatting to like your partner, your family, like have a bit of if you feel comfortable, a conversation about those body parts, and maybe like what other people think of their body parts. And you'll see that, yeah, if we all put our problems in the middle, we probably would just still pick out our own problem.
Love that a lot.
Stolen from Lucy Lord.
Well, love that whole love Lucy Lord, love that quote, but love the way that you framed that there. I think that's fab. And a question.
Is it true that visceral fat doesn't respond to calorie deficits?
Oh, I've never heard that before. No.
No,
I've not.
because we want to have lower visceral fat's what dictates heart disease and type 2 diabetes. So what was the question? Sorry.
Is it true that visceral fat doesn't respond to a calorie deficit?
No.
There's no way. No, just like you can't spot reduced fat, right? And that means that like all fat cells will quote unquote empty if you've been in a calorie deficit for a sufficient amount of time. Where your body fat reduces first or refills up, so to speak, first is largely genetic. So yeah, and on that, in part hormonal too, in the sense of if you have chronically low estrogen levels, like if you're perimenopausal, or you have hypothalamic amenorrhea, you potentially are going to store more fat around your midsection, because of that hormonal distribution. And men versus women, men will tend to store body fat around their midsection more so, and women more so on their legs and their butt. And so that is a hormonal thing too. But if that was the case, then imagine, so say you've got a man in a larger body and he's storing more of his body fat around his midsection, and then you see one of those horrible transformation pictures where he's been on an 8-week shred and he's lost all his weight, like then he's got abs, and it's like if visceral fat didn't respond to a calorie deficit, then that physically wouldn't be possible. Mm-hmm. So just try to be objective with these things. I'd be interested to know where that came from though, because it might be that, I don't know, maybe someone on a podcast somewhere has said something about like where you reduce body fat first, and things like stress and stuff will have an impact to some degree too in terms of fat storage and things. So there's lots of contributors to that, but there's no way that you won't over time reduce body fat from every area. Okay. What's the question?
Okay, this was from one of my clients. What to do post coaching? So they're going to finish up, and they want to know how to sustain their progress and not fall back to old ways.
I think I've said this before, but I always go through like a bit of a self-management plan, like what works, what you know works for you, like what might be signs that you're heading in for a tough time, like potential events that are coming up that again might be trickier to manage without the support of Ros, and going through those sorts of things. And then I think obviously journaling and keeping yourself accountable with that, like whether it's just an end of week reflection and how have you felt, what's gone well, what might need to improve on, have you let anything slip?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's quite nice initially when you stop coaching to still do a weekly check-in with yourself, but then over time maybe drop that down to monthly, and at the end of the month just say, okay, well, what have my habits looked like in the past month, and has anything slipped? Because inevitably things will slip, because that's human, that's life. I encourage my clients to write down like some of their biggest lessons after we finish working together, their biggest lessons, and what they feel has been the most transformative for their relationship with food, in terms of what tools that they found really helpful, what habits they found really helpful. And then of course I'll say like all of the fundamental things, often like eating regularly, practicing mindfulness, etc., these things. And then I encourage them to keep that somewhere, maybe on their phone or the back of their journal or something like that. So then when they do their monthly reflections, they can look back and say, oh yeah, that actually has slipped. And they can start to notice trends, in the sense of like asking yourself, how do I feel this month? Like, what's my overarching feeling this month? Have I struggled with my relationship with food this month? And then looking at those habits that you set, that you said at the end of coaching, and then look at the things that you've done in the last month and say, oh, there's actually maybe a bit of disconnect here, or actually, no, everything's been really connected. I wonder what else is going on. And then getting curious about, oh, maybe it's, do you know what, I've actually had a really stressful month at work and I've not really slept. Oh, that's interesting. That's a vulnerability factor. So next month, I know all my habits are great. I just need to work on my sleep a little bit more. So it's just about staying curious and staying accountable to those things that you know really benefited you in the coaching process. Okay, how can I reduce this concern of never getting to a place that I can wear what I want and feel comfortable and continue day to day doing the stuff that will get me closer to that place? So for context, she's worried that like there's parts of her body that she doesn't like, that she really doesn't like, and she's worried that she's never going to get to the place where she feels comfortable and to wear what she wants. So how to get over that whilst also doing the stuff day to day. It's toughy, isn't it? It wasn't a podcast question. I said I'm going to put this on the podcast because I think it's a great question.
It's a good question.
Part of me, a very big part of me, wants to say, like, and you might not be ready for this just yet, but part of me thinks you should just wear that anyway, and kind of, like we say with challenging perfectionism and doing things imperfectly and realizing that actually it's okay, nobody thinks any less of you, and almost doing that in the sense, yes, you will feel uncomfortable, but oh look, you can wear that and nobody's making judgment, nobody's probably noticing, unless it's some bright garish, I don't know, whatever your style is, go you. But I think just putting yourself out there, like feeling the fear and doing it anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I like that, Anna, because the only person stopping you from wearing that is yourself. And it's like your, maybe belief's too strong a word, but it's your belief of how you feel about that body part. And I suppose it's exposure therapy, almost like, try it on, and as Anna said, see what, people's reaction. And you might actually get like a ton of compliments, because maybe it's a style you've never worn before and people are just like, whoa, that color or that pattern or whatever really suits you. And it could be a really empowering moment for you as well. And like, what's the worst that could happen is that you try it on and nobody is going to make a horrible comment to you, and if they do, then they're not the people to be surrounded by.
Yeah, I agree. I love both of those ideas, and none of those I thought of when I was replying to her check-in. So thanks so much for that. I think interesting that you picked up on exposure therapy, Ross, because I actually did a post on this a while ago. I think with exposure therapy, sometimes we say to people, not us because we know better, but you'll often see on social media this narrative of like, just wear the stuff anyway, and just go out and just look in the mirror and just love what you see and all of the stuff. And it's like, I think it's really important to gradually expose yourself to these things, but I also think it's very important to have a bit of self-regulation strategy in place for when you do that. So like what you were saying in terms of like, it is a bit of an exposure therapy. When you do that, it's going to be scary. Like you touched on it, it's going to be scary. It's going to be really daunting. You're going to feel very vulnerable. So it's really important in those moments that you have a little bit of a self-soothing strategy that's going to help bring things back down, whether it be a bit of compassionate breathing, hand on heart breathing, butterfly taps, something I was talking about on EIQ Live last night, of if you're in a meeting. Yeah, I thought of you last night when I was talking about it, because somebody was saying that their client struggles with anxiety in meetings and what can they do. And I was saying maybe you can just slip your shoes off under the desk at work and just ground your feet on the floor, or just tap your feet on the floor, or just have your hand on your forearm. There's so many things that you can do that are so discreet. So I think that's like an important one, and it's a tool that you could take. Maybe it's a dress that you've worn, or jeans or something that you can take to the restaurant or take to the bar, wherever it is that you can remember to do. So I would say that. And then I think the other thing I would add really is, I'm trying to think of the right way to word this. It's not doing you any favors to ruminate on this stuff, or it's not really rumination, it's worry. It's not all that it's doing. The problem is not what your body looks like. The problem right now is the suffering that you're causing for yourself by telling yourself you're never going to get there. That is it sounds really like trivial, but that is a choice to sit in that suffering, and it's not an easy choice. It's certainly not easy to say I'm not going to worry about the fact that I may never get there. But let's be objective here. Am I doing all the things that are supporting myself? Yes. Am I eating well, exercising well, working on my body image and my relationship with food? Yes. Okay, so objectively, if I'm doing all of these things, eventually I'll get to the I'll be leaner if that's what I want, or I'll progress in this way. Objectively, yes. So then what is this other stuff? Worrying about not getting there? What's the purpose of that? Why would you choose to do that when you're doing everything right? It's literally just stealing your life and taking you away from where you are right now. And I think that is relevant when we look at preoccupation a lot, of like whether it be food preoccupation or body preoccupation. It's like it really is stealing your life, and sometimes it doesn't feel like a choice, and that's often when support is really, really helpful. But I know this person, she's very mindful. She's done a lot of work with mindfulness and compassion and whole, so I know that she's ready to, at least to take that advice on and challenge that a little bit.
It is me, isn't it? I'm just going to butt in. I'll just check before I do. I've got an is it normal one. I know it's normal or to be expected that you might put on weight when starting to heal your relationship with food, but is there an expected amount during this time?
No. Negative.
My camera's on.
Yeah, you're fine.
I know that, well, with my clients, they would like there to be an answer to this, as in they would kind of like there to be a little set range of what is normal. But unfortunately, no. And it really does vary from person to person. So it does as well. And I always say, like, the 4 rings analogy. So when you're cooking, to say you're making something that uses like 3 saucepans, you know, can the top 2 saucepans, that's like healing your relationship with food and your body image, and then the weight, can that be on the back ring? And maybe that's just something simmering away in the background. We're not gonna let it get burnt, but these 2 at the front, they are going to get burnt. Maybe they'll bubble over like pasta or whatever, and we will eventually come to the weight. So we will, and we'll address it, whatever your goals are, if that is like fat loss or if it's just managing that weight gain. But you're probably on this journey for a reason, and that's for healing that relationship with food and body image first. And you know, if they're working with you, Anna, you're not going to let it spiral. So you're going to be there to support her and keep her accountable. But maybe it's just leaning into the process and trusting that it will probably even out as well. It'll kind of like naturally, and maybe it might then drop back as well. But yeah, there's no set perimeters.
I love that analogy. I think the thing is there's no expectation of weight to do anything. It's not an expected thing that you're going to gain weight. It's not an expected thing that you're going to lose weight or maintain weight. And a disclaimer to that is, just because you gain weight when you don't want to gain weight, and it's not an expected thing for everyone, that doesn't mean you're failing because you've gained weight. It's just that for you, that's what that looks like, and that's the right thing for you. And for someone else, it might actually be the right thing, might look like losing fat, and that's the right thing for them. And that doesn't mean that anyone is doing the journey wrong. It's just that that's the healthiest thing. That's the healthiest thing for you to go through right now. And one of the steps to improving your relationship with food and body is to stop trying so meticulously to control what your body does. Your body is going to fluctuate all of the time. It's totally normal. And thinking of your body and your life like seasons, like this season of your life may well be accompanied by a bit of weight gain, and the next season of your life may be accompanied by some weight loss. Who knows? But as Ross said, we are all nutritionists, right? And health coaches in some way, shape, or form. We're never going to be the people that just say, if we think that weight gain would be detrimental to your health, we would be mindful of it for sure. I think, you know, that doesn't mean we force everyone to lose body fat. That certainly is not the case. And for some people, maybe who are in larger bodies, going into a calorie deficit is still not the right thing for them to do. The point is that there's no right specific right way for everyone to do this, and whatever season your body is going through right now is the right thing. And just like you said, Roz, trust in that process, which is a very hard thing to do, and that's why we're here to support that.
I think keeping in mind, like you were saying, with controlling your body, I think the more you try and control it, ultimately the more you're delaying this process.
Agreed. Agreed. Roz, question.
So, protein, how important is it on workout days or non-workout days? Also, what about running days?
It's the same all the days. I think protein is one of those things that realistically should stay relatively consistent most days, because it's important for satiety, for all of the cells in your body, for muscle protein synthesis, which is probably what you're more related to in this specific question. It's super important. And the way that protein works is that you maximally stimulate muscle protein synthesis at a certain amount. That's probably, depending on your body size and muscle mass, probably between 25 to 40 grams in a serving, right? And after you've had that, you need what we call a refractory period, where muscle protein synthesis is kind of spiked, and then things come back down, and then you want to switch it on again 3 or 4 hours later. And that's how it works. It doesn't matter if you've trained or if you've exercised, etc. If you've been to the gym, like, it doesn't, having more protein is not going to change anything in terms of muscle protein synthesis or satiety or anything else. So consistent protein 3 to 5 times a day, probably ish, depending on how much you have, when you like to eat, every day, and that's it. It's very boring.
Yeah, I think the only thing I was going to say, like on that note, in terms of protein serving and what that person's doing, is you might decide on your running day, for example, you'll have smaller but more frequent servings, so it's not sat as heavy in your stomach, but otherwise whatever works for you, really.
I've been really into, like, I know I was going to run today, but it was too snowy, so unfortunately I don't have a death wish, so I didn't go out. But I've been so into right now getting up in the morning, either going to the gym or going for a run, and just having, like, all of my, like, I obviously don't calorie count or track, right, but I know roughly what calories and things, so you can't switch that off. But having, like, almost like the equivalent of a meal, but just in carbohydrate and fat before I train. And I tell you what,
I'm just like, yes.
It's so good. So it would be like 2 pieces of olive bread with peanut butter and jam, say, like, I probably wouldn't have that combination, but like that type of thing, or 2 pieces of bread that I had this morning with peanut butter and jam, which I would never have done like 5 years ago, just because I would think there's hardly any protein in that. There's probably about 10 grams of protein in that. And then coming home and then having like a really big dose of protein, like 30 or 40 grams in like a really nice smoothie or whatever. I had a great smoothie the other day. And then just having my meals after that, like, so after the smoothie, like an hour or 2 after that, then I'll have a big meal and then have my normal meals after. And I tell you what, for my training, it's really makes my training and my running way more enjoyable. I think not having protein in it protein will slow down the digestion a little bit of it. And so does fat, to be fair, but I just like fat because it's delicious. But it really does help my energy levels, and my energy levels, therefore my enjoyment. I would never have done that before. It'd always be like, well, I'm either going to be fasted or have, like, I don't know, 90 calories of carbohydrate, which is basically like sucking air, or like I'll have a full meal. And now I'm like, this is a great way to do it. I highly recommend.
It's something I've just started doing with a client, because she's now working on fat loss, but she's like, I don't like training fasted, but I don't have the time if I'm training early for a full meal, and I want to feel my best. It's like, so we split the meal. Like, so like you said, it's the same, like, well, for her, because we have to be mindful of overall intake, it's the same amount, but we're just making sure she gets the most from her training with the carbs, and then hits her protein after training, and she's loving it. So
nice. Oh, it's me. There's a lot of food chat today. It's making me quite hungry.
No, yeah,
I'm thinking like, about what I've got
to finish this. What am I gonna get?
Truly same.
I was gonna say, whenever I'm not triathlon training at the minute, but when I was, like, last summer, like, I love when I get to like 2-3 weeks outside the race, because you've like ramped up like maybe you're doing block training, so maybe it's like 10K run with a 20K cycle. So I just eat a bowl of oats with peanut butter and jam or Biscoff, and it's delicious. So it is. And so it just, I don't know if it's like, psychologically, I'm like, oh, I'm so well fueled. I can go out and like smash this right now. If you know what I mean? I'm just like, yes, I've got this. And I just didn't really want the protein before like that big run or any, I don't know, the heaviness maybe off it, and then you come home and then you're like, okay, no, I'll refuel. So
yeah, I love that. When I used to teach sport nutrition, and I would teach like carbohydrate recommendations for sport, and like this carbohydrate ranges, I would always just think, gosh, imagine having that, like having to have that many carbohydrates like every single day. I think, oh, that was when I was prepping, so I would just be preoccupied by eating this much carbs. I'm getting them in the wrong sport. Okay, George's question. I'm navigating this journey alongside grief. What to prioritize and self-compassion prompts? Okay. First thing I would say is to read the book When Things Fall Apart. Definitely read that. Read the synopsis first to make sure you're ready to read it, but then read it when you're ready. I think it depends on the stage of your journey that you are at with grief, because I was actually laughing the other day. There's a program on Apple TV called Shrinking, I think, and it's about a therapist. It's very, very good. And I sent Anna a recording of a little bit because the therapist was doing grief tunneling, and it's something that Anna and I learned about years ago on a blog somewhere. And it's basically thought postponement, where you give yourself a certain amount of time to think about something, and then outside of that you let it go. And it was very funny. The therapist was kind of like, oh yeah, I'm absolutely fine about the grief of my wife, the loss of my wife or something. I just put my favorite music on for 15 minutes and I just cry my eyes out, and then I'm like, I'm fine, and then I just get back to work and I'm like, fuck this, and then I just go off. And the reason that I'm bringing that up is because I think with grief, if you're freshly sitting in grief, me saying, oh, grief tunnel, and then only think about it for 50 minutes a day is ludicrous. But on the flip side of that, I think sometimes with grief, and I'm very mindful of my own scope of practice here. I'm just talking about in terms of like my experience myself or with people I've worked with. Sometimes we can sit in grief for so long that it becomes all encompassing. And if that feels like you, then therapy is always a potential. Like grief counselling can be really helpful if you feel like it's very, very overwhelming. And of course that is beyond our scope of practice in that front. So whatever we say here is very much going to be dependent on like what stage of the grief process that you're in.
I'm just looking, because there is a podcast called The Grief Cast that's by a comedian. I was just checking her name. Her name is Carrie Lloyd, and that was a good listen. She has got a book out, and I've just put my phone to the side. So she has got a book out. Google it, and that might be a nice read. I can't say I've read it myself. But I think regardless of kind of where you're at with it, give yourself some grace, because whatever stage, it's mindful of my language, it's friggin' tough. And talk through with Georgia your non-negotiables, like the bare minimum you need to do each day that's going to support you, not just for health and support you through the day, but still working towards those goals, whatever they might look like for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have much to add. Maybe, yeah, personal experience. Like I think grief, everyone's got their own journey. And for me, I did go for grief counselling, but it wasn't until like 6 months too late. And I was like, oh, I feel like this because I've been not understanding that this is grieving going on right now. So yeah, loads of self-compassion, maybe just being like, this is really hard right now. What can I do to be kind to myself? And maybe, yeah, as Anna said, picking the non-negotiables, and maybe just slow down your journey and just pick one thing each week that you're gonna, maybe like one habit that you want that's really going to help you. but yeah, also as Emilia said, like not sometimes you can really get caught up in it, and that's why it might be useful getting like someone else coming, like another therapist coming in that's going to be able to support you with the grief, so that Georgia can support you with the food relationship side of things.
Yeah. And I think with what to prioritize, it's like, well, what feels right for you to prioritize? There'll be certain things that we'll say, like these are like non-negotiables that we would say are really helpful. Eating 3 to 4 servings of protein a day, pretty non-negotiable. I'd probably say 3 is a good non-negotiable. I would say going to the gym or some form of movement 5 days a week, 6 days a week would be a non-negotiable, even if it's just walking to the park and back. Those types of things. But realistically, it's like, well, what do you want to prioritize? What do you feel is the right thing for you to prioritize? Well, let's go with that, because we will meet anyone where they are and we'll support people to move in a way that is the right direction for them. We don't have this specific direction that we take every single client on that goes, right, we're going to go through X, Y, and Z, and that's going to take you to A, B, and C. It's like we meet every client. Okay, where are you right now? What does it sound like you need? Okay, let me help you navigate through that. Okay, where are we now? Okay, you want to prioritize this? I'm going to help you navigate through that. And that's the way that these things last forever. And it's not us just imparting loads of stuff onto you. That's not how our coaching works. And I think with the self-compassion prompts, just thinking about, I think what you said, Ros, of just like, how can I be kind to myself right now? Or what do I need right now? Or maybe little things like grief shows up in different ways. I think for me, that was an interesting one of like, you would like, grief is not like you're sat there crying all the time. So grief might be like you just say something stupid one day and you're like, wait, what? And you're like, oh, that could well just be my grief. Like that's an interesting observation. Or you snap at someone about something and you're like, what, why? And you're like, and just in those moments saying, be curious, that's interesting. Grief shows up in different ways. I think that can be quite a compassionate way of looking at it. Okay, let's leave it there. Thank you everyone for your questions. Keep them coming in. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.